introduce me, and this is my personal project for this year. But of course, it's much more than that. So my personal project this year was to create an index which would give countries a responsibility towards tackling refugee crisis and various ways that they could tackle. So the index is called the Refugee Responsibility and Sustainability Index, and this presentation would explore its potential impact on our world. So before we start, we need first define who a refugee is. So the 951 Refugee Convention has a rather long and slightly confusing definition of refugee, but we'll just go to a simpler definition, just in my own words. So a person who is subjected to some kind of persecution within his country, such as religious persecution or persecution due to being a member of a group, political or otherwise, and has a legitimate threat to his life if he stays in that country, is a person who is a refugee and needs a safe place to live and thus can stay in that country. That's who a refugee is. So why is this important? Why is this index important? So there's been a significant dispute over responsibility over tackling refugee crisis around the world. And as of now, there is no numerical way to measure the responsibility of these countries, and the only way that the UNHCR has been getting message across is using ethical means, which some countries do not stand convinced and use the lack of hard data to refute. Because of this bickering between countries and nation states, people on the ground suffer, they have no safe place to go, and more get killed each day. And this project seeks to offer a solution to this problem. So first of all, what is this index? This index measures, as I said earlier, the country's ability to handle refugees, and it also discusses and takes into account the potential economic impact on absorbing refugees. It assigns a responsibility level to each country, and decides if a country can either take in and resettle refugees within its territory, or to increase its contribution to humanitarian aid efforts in means such as not limited to economic aid, humanitarian aid, economic assistance, technology transfer, etc. The parts of this index consists of three main parts. The first being the RRSI-1, which solely measures the country's ability to absorb refugees and settle them within their own territory. RSI-2 measures a country's ability and responsibility towards increasing their contribution to humanitarian aid efforts around the world. And RSI-3 is the composite of the two and measures the overall responsibility a country should have towards taking in refugees and tackling their attempts to tackle crises such as these. So we have used certain relative terms in the making of this index, high and low, and in order to make the index accurate and effective, let's define these terms. So we have over here 8 parameters that we have used, and each of them have a high and low attached to them. So GDP per capita has been classified as high is greater than $18,000, which is it's just because a lot of the major industrialized countries have per capita no lower than that. Unemployment rate should be less than 9% for it to be low. Natives per refugee should be less than 4,000. Native per refugee measures a country's ratio of its native population versus the refugee population. Now, a low native per refugee means a country has taken a significant number of refugees, and the refugee population makes up a significant proportion of that country, whereas a high native per refugee ratio means that the country has not been very proactive in taking in refugees. GDP growth rate is 6%, needs to be 6% or greater to be high, because most healthy economies require 6% growth rate to stay healthy and to continue to grow at a good pace. Humanitarian aid given should be greater than or equal to $100 million. Even though the UN has higher expectations from countries, not all countries contribute even this much, so we've been a little modest over here. Poverty rate should be no greater than 18%. 18% is a significant number, but since we are dealing with the world over here, we need to make considerations. Native population refugees should be no greater than 0.01%. This measures the native population of a country who are refugees and have either fled the country or internally displaced. And while 0.01% seems to be a small number, it's quite significant. It can grow to 100, 1,000, even millions in cases of some countries, depending on their population. Population density measures the country's land area versus the population that it has, and a high population density means the country does not have enough land and has more people than it should have, and a low population density means the country has a lot of open space. Okay, so how does RSI-1 work? RSI-1 takes into account 6 economic and demographical parameters, namely GDP per capita on a purchasing power basis, natives per refugee, the native population as refugees, the unemployment rate, the poverty rate, and finally the population density. So how this works is, and I will show you in a minute how in a visual way. So we've divided them into 6 groups over here, both these 6 parameters, and we would plot them on a Punnett square kind of thing, based on a high and low basis. So the groups are, I'll explain in a minute what this is. Groups are GDP per capita versus the unemployment rate, native per refugee versus the population density, GDP per capita versus native per refugee, poverty rate versus unemployment, GDP per capita versus poverty rate, and finally native population refugee versus the poverty rate. So this is how we measure it. As you can see, this is group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Country with a high GDP per capita, high and low, and unemployment rate depending high and low, will get a score out of 4, 4 being the best and 1 being not so great. Just to make it more simpler and make it more clear, we're going to evaluate a sample country, in this case Turkey. So we see that Turkey has a high GDP per capita of $90,226, making it high, but has an equally high unemployment rate of 10%. So it's high GDP, high unemployment, which is score of 2. Natives per refugee, Turkey has 46 natives per refugee, which is quite low, and indicates that Turkey has a significant refugee population, and it also has low population density, so it indicates a score of 3, great responsibility. Group 3, it has low natives per refugee, high GDP, so it's a score of 2. Poverty rate in Turkey is considerably low, 16.3% is quite low, and it also has high unemployment rate, so it gets a score of 3 over here. Low poverty but high unemployment. GDP per capita versus poverty rate is high GDP but a low poverty rate, which is a perfect score of 4. Poverty rate versus native population refugees. This really measures the contentment level of the people of the country. Because if there's high poverty and there's a high percent refugees, then the country has serious problems. So in this case, Turkey gets a score of 3 because it's doing well on both parameters. So now this is the scoring. As you remember, Turkey has a score of 17 over here. It will make sense in a minute when we put on a scale. So this is the scale on which we would measure the RSI 1. So we went into 3 parts again. A score of 6 to 11, 6 being the least, indicates a decreased responsibility to resettle refugees, and a non-refoulement policy is not allowed. Non-refoulement, for those who do not know, is a policy of sending back refugees from the border of their country, which is what we see a lot of European nations such as Croatia and Hungary doing at this point, which is not very fair. Score 12 to 17 means an increased responsibility to settle refugees, but no obligation. So these are the countries which could potentially absorb refugees and settle them within their countries, but they have significant demographical or economic challenges and do not have an immediate obligation to do so. Score of 18 to 24 indicates that these countries are developed countries, stable economies, and of course a lot of land space in relation to this, meaning that these countries have the foremost and the great responsibility to help these people and settle them within their countries. So we see Turkey at a score of 17, so Turkey falls into the no obligation category. So now this RSI 2. RSI 2 takes into account the same parameters, but instead of we substitute population density with GDP growth rate and the ratio of native population to refugees with humanitarian aid given, because RSI 2 measures the country's humanitarian aid response. Again, we have our 6 groups. All of them are saying for group 2 is changed to humanitarian aid given versus native population refugees, and group 6 have changed to GDP growth rate versus the humanitarian aid given. So GDP growth rate is there, so the country can actually sustain the aid that is given, or even give greater aid if the good growth rate. Once again, we have a familiar looking Punnett square diagram. We'll evaluate Turkey on this. Once again, everything is same except for group 2 and 6. So Turkey gives a lot of humanitarian aid, 1.6 billion, which is one of the highest in the world. Turkey falls in the top 5 greatest countries with humanitarian aid, and it also has a low native population refugees, which gives it a score of 3. Going on to group 6, Turkey does not has an abysmal growth rate of 3%, but again has a high humanitarian aid contribution. So it should really not be contributing that. It doesn't have as much responsibility to contribute humanitarian aid as other countries do, so it gets a score of 2. Once again, Turkey has a score of 17. We'll map this against our index, scale I mean. So once again, score 6 to 11, this scoring fields came to the definition of different. Score 6 to 11 indicates a decreased responsibility to recognize refugees and provide humanitarian aid. These countries have, once again, very severe economical challenges and can probably not even provide for their own people, less provide for refugees abroad. But 12 to 17 means that these countries could potentially contribute, but may have their own challenges and are not obliged to do so. which is where Turkey falls. Score 1824, once again, the powerful, rich and developed countries which have both the money and the resources to contribute to humanitarian aid, giving them the foremost responsibilities. Finally, our side 3 is our composite, so we have taken into consideration both the ratio of need per refugee and the humanitarian aid given, with the composite, of course. Once again, the only difference is in group 2 and group 6. Need per refugee versus humanitarian aid given, and native population refugee versus support given. Once again, Turkey has a score of 17 on here. Turkey has a perfect score in group 6, with a low poverty rate and a low native population crisis. Once again, a similar looking index, but since the composite, this has more general terminology. The score 6 to 11 indicates that that countries should not be sharing any burden of refugee crisis anywhere in the world. 12 to 17 indicates that they could potentially do so, but once again, are not obliged to do so. They may have some challenges or may encounter some challenges. Score 18 to 24 indicates a pressing need and responsibility to contribute and help people in need. And these countries probably have all the resources, the land, everything to actually help these people in need. So now our real life scenario to which this index will be applied is the Syrian refugee crisis of 2015, which is making headlines each and every day for the wrong reasons. So an overview of the crisis. The Syrian refugee crisis started with the Syrian civil war in 2011. The civil war itself started with peaceful student protests in the city of Damascus and Homs. Of course, these protests were crushed by the Assad government by using excessive force, and soon these protesters turned into rebels and then formed their own militia groups, and thus the civil war started. Initially, the refugees fled to Turkey and Lebanon, and later to Jordan. But as these countries started to get full, they explored new avenues to flee to, and they started looking at Europe. Now, since there's Mediterranean Sea between Syria and Europe, almost as of November 2015, more than 4,000 Syrian refugees have died just crossing, making the journey between the Mediterranean Sea and Syria. As of November 2015, more than 4.2 million Syrian refugees have been forced to flee Syria for fear of persecution or fear to life. And of these countries, Turkey alone hosts 1.7 million, and Jordan hosts more than about 1.5 times the amount as 2.5 million refugees, making the single largest host of Syrian refugees. Now in Europe, when these refugees got to Europe, European nations started to spar over which country should take in the most refugees. And in Europe, there are severe divisions, with countries like Germany and Austria taking hundreds of thousands of refugees, on countries like Croatia and Hungary building border fences and shooting at refugees and preventing them from entering their country. In a conference that took place in early 2015 on sharing this basis, while Germany and Austria decided to take the most share, countries like UK and Denmark has decided to simply opt out of this, turning a kind of a blind eye to this crisis. So now, since this is a crisis that affects the world in general, but there are some countries which are more immediately impacted than others. This is what we will be evaluating on this index. These countries are Turkey, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Germany, Hungary, Greece, Italy, Austria, Russia, and the United States. First of all, we evaluate these countries on RSI 1, and the first thing we see, without comparing the scale and everything, we see that there is a severe disparity between countries. For example, take Jordan and the example of the US, for instance. Clearly, Jordan and the US are in clearly different categories and have very different scores, indicating probably that these countries have very different responsibilities also towards taking care of the refugees. And we also see that certain countries that have lower scores have seemed to have less responsibility, but is that what's on the ground? Not really. We see countries such as Greece, Italy, Jordan, and Turkey who have taken the most Syrian refugees have lesser responsibility than countries who have not taken those many refugees, such as the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Hungary, and Russia. Germany and Austria-Hungary are the only two countries who have taken a significant amount of refugees, while countries such as Saudi Arabia and Hungary have the money and the land and have contributed negligible amounts taken negligible amounts of refugees and settled them in their own countries, which is unfair given that they have a much greater responsibility than these countries who have actually taken steps to do so. Evaluating them on RSI 2, which by the way measured the humanitarian aid contribution a country should be making. Once again, we see richer countries with higher scores and countries with less stable economies, nonetheless poor, but otherwise lower score. We see Jordan is in the no responsibility category. We see that the countries least responsible to contribute humanity are Jordan, and ironically, Jordan hosts the greatest population of Syrian refugees, which is ironical because Jordan itself has its own economic challenges and has been in recession for the last 2 years. Countries which should be contributing, which have taken in refugees but not contributed that much of aid are Italy, Greece, and Turkey. They are taking refugees, so they really do not need to contribute that much aid. But now, on the other hand, we see countries such as the UAE, Russia, and Hungary who have the money, but and has not given that much aid. For instance, but once again, we have countries like Germany and Austria who have given millions and billions of dollars in aid, but given very little taking. Yeah. So, for instance, Germany has given aid of $1 billion and has taken in more than 800,000 refugees. In contrast with a country like Hungary, which has given less than $1 billion of aid, which is, by the way, even lesser than the aid that India and China give at 2.5 and $4 million each. So really, countries over here need to recognize responsibility. Moving on to RSI 3, which was the composite of the two indices, we see similar results there. The similar country with lower scores and higher scores. Again, richer countries, larger countries with lesser population with higher scores, and country with less stable economy and higher population with lower scores. It just shows that countries which have the least responsibility of taking refugees are countries such as Jordan, who have been facing both demographical and economic challenges. Countries with a degree responsibility but not obligated to really help are Saudi Arabia, Italy, Greece, and Turkey. Ironically, Italy, Greece, and Turkey have actually given the most help. Countries with a pressing need and responsibility share the burden of crisis around the world are, of course, the developed and rich countries: Germany, Austria, Hungary, Russia, the UAE. Of these countries, only Germany and Austria have actually taken in refugees, and the US has contributed significant amounts of aid. The UAE has a lot of empty space, a very small population, and a lot of money, and has done very little to help these people. Hungary does not have a lot of space, but has a lot of money, and has again given very little aid, less than $1 million in 2015. Yep. So now it's time to discuss the accuracy of this index in relation to a real-life scenario. From RSI 1, we saw that countries such as Russia and the UAE, Saudi Arabia have both the space and money to resettle refugees, but of course these countries have done very little to settle refugees, the US being an exception because the US is the greatest contributor to humanitarian aid at $4.7 billion. But these countries are here because they have stable economies, well, most of them have stable economies except Russia, and can actually sustain these refugees. Like I said, Greece, Italy are going through economic trouble and may not be able to sustain an influx of refugees, but in reality they actually are. RSI 2, which measured humanitarian aid a country should be given. Once again, we see countries like Germany, the US, and Austria, who are rich, have small populations and have a lot of empty space, can contribute to increase the contribution to aid. Germany also has a growing economy, which gives it an added incentive. Countries like Jordan are poorer as compared to these richer countries and have unstable economies. Thus, they should not be pressurized to provide more aid or to fund these refugees. And RSI 3, we see that developed countries, US, Germany, Austria, have the ability to both contribute to humanitarian aid and take in refugees, which is the real life case. These countries do have a lot of space and money, and countries like Jordan are small, have populations large for their size, and do not have very good economies, should not be given as much responsibility as they are actually being given. So now it's also important to ascertain the indicators and how these relate not only to the real life scenario but also to the accuracy of this index. RSI 1, we chose a poverty rate. In fact, poverty rate unemployment chose for all of them, but just summarize here. They were chosen so we can assess the economic state of the country if they can actually handle these refugees. Population density was chosen so we can make sure that the country either has or does not have enough space in relation to population to sustain the refugees. Names per refugee allows for healthy boundaries in native refugees because no country would want more refugees than its native population. And RSI 2, we see GDP per capita, which is again evaluated and all, but we'll discuss in relation to it first, and GDP growth rate in relation to humanitarian efforts. Since RSI 2 measures the amount of aid, the amount of money a country gives, it needs to have a healthy growth rate to actually sustain that aid. and it's not, unfortunately, not the case. Countries get a lot of aid, but do not have very good growth rates. RSI 3 contains a mix of both, so that's why we've taken into account both humanitarian aid and aid for refugee, because it should have a little bit of both indicators to give an accurate overview of how it should go. This index is not just a personal project, it's much more than that, and as here we see that it has significant potential world impact. This indicator has the potential to solve the ongoing debate within the EU Parliament over which countries take more responsibility, because countries with the high responsibility have a higher score on this index should be given more refugees. The countries stay with the lower score on this index, so that solves the problem right away. This was the first time that there would be a numerical way to assess the responsibility countries have towards contributing to refugee crises around the world, and come as a big relief to organizations such as the UNHCR, who have been trying their level best to convince countries that they have a responsibility, but do not have really hard statistics to be able to back that claim up, and they've been using ethics which certain countries have just been ignoring. So during the making of the project, we had it was not my prerogative alone. We had Mr. A, who was the guiding light of the project, and he was the one who guided me through this entire phase of getting the index ready and being able to you all. And Mr. Michael, because this is a personal project, so he helped. So there were certain formalities associated with the personal project, and Mr. Michael helped to brief not only me but all 10th grade students over how we should go forward with this. My citations. Thank you.